These are the best alternatives to Rolex's most popular watches. So Rolex makes a number of watches that have a huge following and are supremely popular on the watch market today. From the Daytona to the GMT, the Submariner, Milgauss, Explorer II. I mean, it's really an endless list of watches, but I feel there are a number of watches that make for great alternatives for those popular Rolex models that I would love to present to you today because they really are overlooked. Starting first with the Rolex Daytona. Now this is one of the most popular watches in the world today because ultimately the design is kind of faultless. I mean, it's so sporty yet elegant. It can be dressed up, it can be dressed down. You can really wear this to any situation, any occasion, and it would fit. It's never out of place. There are a number of alternatives for it. And one of them I feel definitely doesn't get enough shine, and that is Tag Heuer. Now, Heuer, about 50 or so years ago, prior to it being acquired by Tag, was a historic chronograph maker. And those Heuer chronographs have become supremely collectible in today's market. Tag Heuer has released a number of faithful re-editions that I feel make for great alternatives to the Rolex Daytona. One of them is the Heuer Octavia Jack Heuer edition. Now this comes in a really nice 42mm case with a 3-register format, same as the Daytona, in steel, on a metal bracelet with that beautiful kind of bezel that I think is super functional and adds to the character and taste of the watch. And again, you get a panda style dial that is really reminiscent of the Daytona, yet has that history and heritage of Heuer chronographs from old. And at the end of the day, it's just a faultless design that I feel is very versatile and super under the radar, and yet super underappreciated as well. Another alternative from Tag Heuer is the Heuer Octavia Heritage. Now this is a reverse panda chronograph in that it's a black dial with white subdials. And so this would make for a great alternative to the steel black dial Daytona. And again, it's one of those watches that is very functional. I like the design a lot. From the discrete day window at 6 o'clock, that really nice rotating bezel. Again, you get that chronograph functionality, all powered by an in-house movement from Tag Heuer. Super underrated watch overall that makes for a fantastic alternative. Now we move on to maybe the most iconic watch of all time, and that is the Rolex Submariner. At least in my opinion, it's definitely the most iconic watch of all time, but I think there are a number of alternatives that you can choose from that make for fantastic choices over and above it. The most obvious being the Omega Seamaster. Now, there's a number of editions, the most famous being the Seamaster Professional 300 meters, which was famously worn by Pierce Brosnan in the James Bond movies when he played that character. Now, the modern Seamaster also features a lot of the hallmarks that we saw on that watch that Pierce Brosnan wore as he played James Bond, such as the H-link style bracelet, the twisted lug case, and last but certainly not least is that wave dial. I think overall it's a knockout design that I feel is really great, but I think there's actually another Seamaster that makes for a fantastic alternative to the Submariner, and that is the Seamaster Heritage. They recently released this last year, actually in 2021, both in a blue dial and a black dial. It features a really nice sandwich style dial that's kind of like Panerai, but it evokes a really kind of vintage watch in my opinion, yet it has kind of the modern case size and sensibility as well as movement technology of a modern wristwatch. The fit finish of the case and bracelet overall is just fantastic, and I feel it really is a fantastic alternative to the Rolex Submariner. The next watch is one that I feel actually is quite difficult to find suitable alternatives for because it's a watch and a design that is distinctly Rolex and really can't be replicated as well by anybody else, and that is the Rolex GMT-Master II. Now, that's not to say that there aren't other great GMT alternatives on the market today. I just personally think that the Rolex GMT-Master II's design is the purest for the GMT format that they've achieved, and at the end of the day is really the most versatile and the best one. Now, that's not to say that there aren't great alternatives to the Rolex GMT nonetheless. One of them being this watch. It's the PAM Reference 1535. It actually features a really interesting 42mm stainless steel case, so it's actually quite wearable for a Panerai. It's in the Luminor format, so it has that kind of iconic crown guard that Panerai is really known for, but I think it's done in a format with a kind of hobnail dial that I think is super well done, with a GMT hand that can be hidden under the hour hand, so it can be super discreet as well. And it all is powered by a Panerai in-house movement. So overall, the text and specs that you get in this watch is not only super functional and a great alternative to the GMT, but I think it's super unique and also definitely lends itself to the Panerai history and iconic design that they are ultimately known for. Now there's also a number of other great options. The Tudor Black Bay GMT, actually Longines just released the Zulu time this year that I think also make for great alternatives, but I think this Panerai is really something that's off the beaten path and a little different from the GMTs we're typically used to, and so I felt this actually would be the best alternative to the Rolex GMT overall. Now the next watch is one that's actually quite difficult to find alternatives for because it's so quirky and unique design-wise, and that is the Rolex Milgauss. This was actually a watch that was originally released back in 1956, and it was a watch that was fully amagnetic. It was hidden inside of an iron cage, and the reason being is that it was an engineer's watch and also a pilot's watch where you wouldn't want the movement to get magnetized or it would really affect the accuracy of the watch. Now modern Milgausses are known for kind of their lightning bolt hand, but as well as for that GV glass that is so distinct from Rolex. But there is one watch that I feel actually makes for a fantastic alternative, and that is the IWC Ingenieur. And this is a watch that actually features a really stunning blue dial with a distinct seconds hand in kind of the same way the modern Milgausses do. And this was a watch that actually predates the Milgauss. So in terms of functionality, it's a watch that was done before the Rolex Milgauss, actually 1 year prior, back in 1955, with the original reference being the reference 666. That's right, it's the devil worshipper's watch. No, I'm just kidding. All kidding aside, it's a fantastic watch that has a great design, and actually it was one that was re-engineered or redesigned by Gerald Genta himself back in 1976 with the reference Ingenieur 1832. And this is a design that I feel is so great, and I really hope that IWC re-releases it to the general public because it would present itself as a great alternative for a Genta designed sports watch that isn't the Royal Oak and Nautilus, which now sell for boatloads of cash. So not only would it make for a great Milgauss alternative because of its history, but again, it would be a great sports watch alternative to those kind of higher echelon Genta designed watches, it being, of course, a Genta design watch itself. Next is an alternative to a watch that's actually worn by the current president of the United States, and that is the Rolex Datejust. Now, the Rolex Datejust is a very pure and clean design, and it's super versatile, and so to find an alternative for that, you have to find something that really mimics it from a design and style perspective. And for me, the best option is actually the Vacheron Constantin 56. This is just a kind of self-winding watch, very clean and classy design that can be dressed up, dressed down. It's super versatile, and yet it's made by a Holy Trinity brand and sells on the secondary market for less than a Rolex Datejust, which, all things considered, in my opinion, is a real travesty, and yet I think it's a phenomenal value for the collectors in the know. With a 40mm steel case and a very kind of pure and elegant design, I think it lends itself really well as a great alternative to the Rolex Datejust, and it's super versatile because you can get it both in a blue dial or in a silver dial, which again gives you that different options for whatever suits your personal taste and style. And it coming from Vacheron Constantin means you're getting a watch that is supremely well finished, and yet it's at a very accessible price point. And so overall, I feel it's a fantastic alternative to the Rolex Datejust, and definitely without a doubt the best one out there. Last but not least is the Rolex Explorer. Now, I view a Rolex Explorer really as a highly legible field watch, and so the best alternatives, in my opinion, are those same field watches. And the one that I feel does this the best is actually from a German brand, one that's not super well known to the watch industry, and that is the Glashütte Original Sederner Excellence. Now there's one version in particular of this watch that has a highly legible dial with pilot style Arabic numerals, high contrast because it's a black dial with kind of white hands and indices that are really legible and great for kind of field purposes. And it's a watch that comes in a really practical steel case. Now the most impressive part of this watch is not its design, it's actually its movement. This is powered by the Glashütte Original Caliber 36, which has a 100-hour power reserve, which is supremely impressive, especially because according to Glashütte's own in-house tests, it passes those chronometer certifications, although it is technically not a chronometer certified watch. So overall, what you get is a highly legible field watch that can also lend itself as a great pilot's watch, and a watch that's powered by a movement with a 100-hour power reserve. So you can set it down for a couple of days and pick it back up, and it'll be right where it left off. So those are my favorite alternatives to popular Rolex models. Now, of course, this list isn't the end-all be-all. There's a number of other great alternatives that I didn't mention in this list. At the end of the day, you have to buy the watches that speak to you, whether that is a Rolex watch or an alternative to a popular one. Guys, I would love to hear your feedback in the comments below as well. What videos you'd like to see from us on the Luxury Bazaar YouTube channel. And please, of course, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more in the future. Until next time, I'll see you in the next one.